10 years ago, I was in a high school classroom as an 18-year-old. Actually, I was 17 at the time. I shortly after joined the United States Marine Corps as a combat infantryman, rifleman, and machine gunner with the 1st Battalion, 7th Marines. I was then sent to Iraq. I then saw some of my best friends killed a couple feet away from me. I had to take the life of Iraqi civilians and combatants overseas. When I came home, I began to organize, because when I was in Iraq, I realized that we were not protecting those people. We were creating enemies, and we were creating hostility by our presence in those nations. And then when I came home, I got involved with Iraq Veterans Against the War, and I started to organize. And then I saw how these issues were connected. So there's nothing separate about fighting 7,000 miles away from home and a $700 billion a year defense budget and cuts at home. How many of you knew that 18 veterans kill themselves on average a week? How many of you knew that a quarter of the homeless population in the United States of America are veterans? There's 250,000 veterans who sleep on the streets every night. Out of those veterans, 56% of them are Latin American and African American. How many people knew that veterans are facing an unemployment average twice that of the national average, at 15–18%? Guess what? For African American and Latino veterans, that number jumps to 35%. This is what we're facing when we get home as veterans. So the promises that our elected officials supposedly make, they're not being lived up to. And there's nothing separate about spending $10 billion a month in Iraq and Afghanistan and cuts at home. How many people knew this? And this is the last number I'm going to throw out. It cost $65 billion to feed everyone on food stamps last year. That's $65 billion. We spent that in Iraq and Afghanistan in 6 months. In 6 months in the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, we could have provided $65 billion worth of food stamps to men and women in America. And the last point I'll make is that our enemies are not and the prisons. 10% of those in prisons right now are veterans. How many people knew that? The other point I want to make is that our enemies are not 7,000 miles from home. They're the Koch brothers. They're the Governor Walkers of the world. They're the folks who seek to strip our rights, to break down collective bargaining rights, to bash the unions, and to attack poor people. Those are our enemies, not our enemies in the Middle East. Our enemies are right here at home.